Good evening, everyone. This is Donald again. It is Tuesday, March 17th, 2020. It's almost 10 o'clock here on Tuesday evening. Basically, the first day of our shelter in place here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I hope everybody's well. I actually had a pretty good day. I decided to do another podcast today, but focusing on my most recent high school officiating season. But also, if that was the only topic, it'd probably go pretty fast in the podcast. But I decided to give some background to how things began and how I ended up doing the NorCal game. I think they're all somewhat interrelated. So I thought that would be a good kind of interesting piece of history for some folks, but also maybe a good learning lesson for folks who are officiating and maybe looking to improve, and how much what I did specifically. And again, everyone may have different things they want to do. But, again, like I've said in my previous podcast, if you have any comments or questions, just let me know. So the topic, like I said tonight, is for my podcast is the road to the NorCals. And again, it's my personal experience of how I got to the NorCals. If I were to look back at when this little trek of me getting to the NorCals began, I would say it goes back to somewhere around 2011. I would call that the beginning, but the beginning that was almost the end. What do I mean by that? Well, around 2011, I hit a bit of a tough spot in my personal life. A few things happened. I won't get into all the details, but I had a lot of stuff happen, and I hit a very rough personal period at that point. So I believe at that point, maybe the following season, 2011, 2012, I can't remember if I did it the following year, but basically at some point I took a leave of absence from officiating from my referee group at that point. I had been with the group from a high school perspective, since 2002. I was an okay official, but my career up to that point had been kind of inconsistent. I had ref some games when I had time, but I also had to not ref as much due to work, and that's been kind of the way my career had gone. So at around 2012-ish, around that time frame, due to my personal stuff, I took a leave, and at some point, maybe the year after, again, I don't remember all the dates, I actually contemplated quitting officiating. But before I decided to quit, I had gotten to know one of our referees, a guy named Mike Wong. I think he started maybe a year after me or before me. I can't remember when he started in our high school group, but Mike had established himself as a pretty solid referee, good guy, and he also worked close to where I was. So we would meet up for lunch every now and then and talk about officiating. And one day I decided, hey, Mike, can we talk? And I didn't tell him why I wanted to talk. So we met up, and I just laid it out to him. I said, going through some tough personal stuff, and don't know if officiating is something I want to continue with. I think it was probably, at that point, I was focused on primarily quitting high school officiating and maybe staying with like the CYL stuff I had done a long time before I started high school. So that day, we had lunch, we talked about it with Mike, and Mike came to this conclusion. He says, Don, I don't think you should quit. He says, it's your call. However, Don, he says, if you decide to hang on and stick with officiating, which Mike was encouraging me, obviously, he says, I want you to make a promise to me, and said that if you do stay, that you will focus on improving yourself every time you're out there. Put some work into it. And that was an interesting challenge from Mike. I can't remember exactly what I thought at that point, but I thought about it, and I said, you know what, Mike? I'll go ahead and make that promise to you. So I told him I would stay on, and I told him I would focus on getting better. And it's an interesting thought looking back at it, because I think at some points while I was working on when I first started officiating high school, and I had gone to some camps earlier in my career, I thought the amount of work people put in officiating was a lot. And there seemed to be a lot of, in my perception, at least at the time, a lot of what we call negativity. Meaning like, no matter what you did, there was always something that you could do better. And maybe I, at being too young, didn't really understand that, you can never, there's never a end goal as an official, because you're never going to be perfect and there'll be always something you can do better. But that was my young self, and maybe I didn't like it, and that may have kind of come across when I was kind of doing my high school games in the early part of my career. So after talking to Mike and deciding not to quit, and kind of getting myself back into at least doing some high school games, I went about working on little things. There's a lot of stuff I worked on. I won't go through all of them, but I focused on a couple of mechanical things I wanted to get better at. I did a couple of other things to improve my voice and whatnot. So I focused on those little things and kept working better. And keep in mind, I didn't really have an end goal. It was just little things. I just want to do X. I just want to do Y. And I actually got there. I think I actually improved on those couple of things I set my mind to. But I don't know if I was doing it right or wrong. But you know what? It was a goal. And it was ultimately to prove to myself, I think, at that point that, hey, if I set my mind to something to get better at, that I can do it. And I did it, which I was happy with. Then at some point after that, from an officiating standpoint, I really started to devote myself to improving my three-person mechanical skills. So at that point, and I don't remember all the years, they're all kind of mixed up these days, I started revisiting camps, at least during those part of years. I dropped into Marcella Dobbs' high school camp at that point when she still had it. I think I did it for a year or two. Because I worked for did Marcella Dobbs camp with her East Bay officials, I got asked to help out with some of her CYO East Bay tournament games, which involve three-person. So I worked on those. I started working with Mike Wong and some other of the officials in one of our local Bay Area church leagues at their top division for their adult leagues, and working on three-person things. Any opportunity I got to work on a three-person game, I basically went ahead and did it. Whether it was, mostly it wasn't paid. I mean, I was paying to go to camps. A lot of these adult leagues and CYL stuff was basically almost volunteer. So, but it's fine. I took it as basically a chance to gain some experience from a mechanical perspective and work on my three-person stuff, because that seemed to be the end goal for a lot of people. But to be honest, as I work through some of this stuff with the three-person, I started realizing that mechanically knowing the three-person stuff is fine, but there's a lot of other officiating things that you still got to work on. There's officiating, there's game management, looking at the shot clock, being aware of game situations, dealing with the coaches, all these little things that you never really think about. But if you do want to get better, and that's fine, getting better personally is one thing, and then also potentially working better games where you have to be really cognizant of a lot of situations, well, you need to get those little things done. So I really got the three-person stuff done fairly well, in my opinion. I could always improve, but I got better. But then there was also a lot of little things I realized that, damn, I got to work on. Right? Being aware of the shot clock, working with coaches, all of that stuff. So I really spent some time dedicated to the craft. It's not an easy thing to work on a lot of these things. It takes a lot of practice, and sometimes you're not always going to get coaches who are going to yell at you and give you a hard time. But when they do, you got to be prepared to handle it. So I worked on it a lot for a few years, and basically, started getting better at little things. Again, keeping in mind, I had no goals. I was just trying to get better. Maybe, I think in talking to Mike, maybe I would end up working higher level games. Assigners always, they'll have their opinions of you, and if they think you're at some level, they'll always give you those games, and you have to prove that you're better. And to be frank, I wasn't too worried about it. I'm not one of those guys that are gonna try to tell people like, hey, I think I'm better, give me a chance. I just figured, hey, I'll do best I can. If someone notices, great. All of that stuff. So that was my philosophy and whatnot. So I went with it. So I kept working games, and I'm definitely cutting a lot of detail out of here. So I worked games, and then around the 2018-2019 season, so basically the season before the most recent one, I did my share games, had some opportunities to work with some veteran officials, made some mistakes along the way, didn't do good on some things, but I thought I had a solid season the year before. And I thought I could have done better in some situations, but you do what you can. So it was a bit of a surprise to me when toward the end of the 2018-2019 season that I was told I was nominated as an alternate for the Northern California State playoffs. It never crossed my mind that I would even do a state playoff game. Being nominated as alternate, I was like shocked. So I'm like, okay, I must have done something right, As it turned out, I was not needed as an alternate to work any games. I think the schedule got filled and no one really declined their game. So it was me and a couple other guys who were nominated. We did not get a game. And that, when you're nominated, you always hope you get something. So probably a little bit disappointed, to be honest, but it's okay. And I told, if those of you who have me on Facebook probably saw my post saying, hey, it was great to be nominated at least, right? You can at least feel like you accomplished something. At least someone thought you were doing well enough to do a state game, which is fine. So once the season ended last year, I was like, okay, got to start working on stuff. And so entering this past season, the 2019-2020 season, or at least before that, I started again, went to a camp. Went to one of the camp in the Silicon Valley group that one of our officials who work with us, but he works down there as well. I went in his camp. Had a decent camp, a couple of hiccups here and there, to be honest. It was a good learning experience, but probably not something I would want to repeat again. It was not pleasant, some of the situations that happened. It was partially my fault or our crew's fault, whatever the case may be. But I worked on it. And then as I jumped into, the summer, I worked on, again, same thing that I did for the past few years, working on different adult leagues and church leagues and whatnot, just working to improve myself. And as I entered as the 2019-2020 season started, I felt I was in a pretty good spot for fishing. Did a lot of work. And I even went to another camp in September. Worked a lot. Had some feedback that said I could be better. And after taking a break and refocusing for the season, I was like, I'm ready to go. Did a lot of work. Worked a lot of 2-person, 3-person games with a lot of different officials. And to be frank, man, like I said, there's a lot of stuff you got to work on. And you don't realize it until you got other people pointing it out to you. One of the veteran officials pointed out to me, hey, man, got to keep your backcourt count matched up with the shot clock. I had a bit of a hiccup during my early season games. Dealing with coaches, dealing with tables and other types of stuff like that. Just basically being a leader on the court, even if you're not the lead official, it's a lot of work. And I was, there's only so many things you can do that you can work on at any one point during the season. So I focused on a couple of things and tried to get better. And again, unlike previous years, I was hoping to get a NorCal nomination and hopefully get a game. I'll explain toward the end why I was hoping for that. And it came true. I was actually early nominated for the NorCals this year. Got my forms filled out, and I'm like, cool. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully I get a game this year. And again, due to the lack of officials, I mentioned in some of my other podcasts, officials are in somewhat short supply. Due to various reasons. So I got to work a ton of games. And my job at the time actually gave me the opportunity to put in a lot of time in as official. And I did a lot of games. Did varsity, boys and girls, JV, boys and girls, even freshman stuff. I was okay with it. I'm going to do as much games as I can. And, for most games, I worked on little things to get better. And hopefully I did. And I actually had good opportunities to work a whole bunch of different games this year. I got a chance to work at the Cow Palace out here in San Francisco for a JV game, a couple of JV games, which is cool. It wasn't varsity, but that's all right. Chance to work at a pretty intense, couple of intense games with some pretty sizable crowds at the Cow Palace was cool. Ended up working 2 2 varsity playoff games and a JV semifinal and a JV final, which was cool. And all of that, well, I was like, let me see if I get my NorCal game. And about a couple of weeks after I did my, I think, JV final, I got the, actually, no, it was not the JV. It was the day before the JV final. I got a letter indicating that, hey, you've been nominated by your NorCal group, which I knew. Well, you're going to get a game. That was a happy moment, man. It wasn't something I, like, explicitly what I wanted to do since I started officiating. But since I got nominated last year, I was like, be nice to at least do one. And it was good to get acknowledgement that I would get it done. So after I did the day before, after I got the letter, I had a varsity playoff that day. I did the game, and then I did the, I think I did the JV final the next day, if I remember correctly. Regardless, I had some time off, and I started prepping myself for the NorCal game. I didn't know where it was going to be. I don't know who I was going to be working with, but I basically mentally started prepping myself to say, okay, get your head ready, physically stay ready, to the point where, from a prepping perspective, as most people who know me, I also play a lot of basketball. I actually chose not to play as much, just to take it easy on the legs. Don't want to get hurt, right? Playing ball when you're about to officiate, at least a pretty important game, at least for myself. So I took it easy on basketball, and then on the game day I was going to work on, as it turned out, was March 3rd. I got the game on Monday, on the 2nd, in the morning, and I was working with a couple of people from my group. One veteran official who does college and has done NorCal and state finals, and another guy who has done a NorCal prior and does some other games as well. Some at our highest league, or one of our better leagues, and of course it was me, which is fine. So it was good to get everything settled, and luckily we didn't have to travel too far. We just had to go to the East Bay to work our game. And talking about the experience of doing the NorCal game, there's some differences than working that NorCal game than traditionally what we do for most of our regular season, even some playoff high school games. Here's the differences. It was required of us for us to be at the gym for the NorCal game an hour before game time. Our game was at 6 o'clock, and we had to be there at 5. In the East Bay. All of us officials were on the West Bay side, so I decided to be the person to pick up everyone. It was suggested from our assigner that everybody commute together. Obviously, it's not always possible, but given we were all kind of within the same area, all 3 of us, I decided to just drive everyone. So I went and picked up our first official because she was close to my house. Then we picked up the other guy, and we went. We were probably at the gym around 20 minutes before 5, and we were parked there to go, and we were talking in the car all the way through, and then we went into the gym at around 5 o'clock. The other thing was, with our regular season games, at least most of the leagues, you could go to the game 30 minutes before, and you could be dressed in your officiating clothes, ready to go. For the NorCal game, we were told to dress in business casual and change at the gym. I think colleges do that and whatnot, which is fine. And so, given, hey, it's a NorCal game, it's a big deal for all the kids and the schools, come in and look professional. So that's what we did. And me and my crew got there early. We were talking in the car. We had good conversation. We mentally prepped, talked through all of our stuff, what we needed to do in the car. Once we got to the gym, we introduced ourselves to the gym directors, and also I mentioned Marcella's name earlier as part of my experience. Guess what? I'm working at a gym that Marcella assigns for her East Bay leagues, and she was there watching maybe as a table helper, as an observer, just to see how the officials were. So it was actually, in a way, very good to have Marcella be there, because she, along with Mike and a lot of other people, I can't name everybody, but Marcella helped me out a lot, and it was kind of interesting that she happened to be there. So we introduce ourselves to the directors, go into the changing room, and we finish our pregame. Talked about, okay, stay focused on your primaries and the three-person mechanics. Understand when to switch, when not to switch, on fouls, rotations. Talk through a lot of different things and make sure we were mentally ready to go. And then 15 minutes before the game's at 6. We went out at 5:45. We were on the court, and it was game time, man. And to be honest, even though I'm talking about this podcast, those who've done NorCal and state finals and whatnot will probably laugh at what I'm saying. Of course, it's a big deal to me that I did the game. It's my first one. But in reality, during the game or during the pregame and all of that, I actually was somewhat relaxed. Maybe I had some nervous energy, but I did treat it like a regular game. I was confident in my three-person mechanics. I felt like I was ready to go, and overall, I won't talk a lot about the game itself. The game was a blowout, but from just a high-level perspective, leaving the gym that night after the game finished, I thought me, my crew, the two other officials did a good job overall. A couple of things that we can improve on, obviously, which I'll talk about toward the end in terms of my learning lessons. But I thought we did a good job. And then after the game, we had a post-game, talked a little bit. My crew grabbed dinner out where we were because they had the one official had a game the next day. The other guy had to go back to work. So we grabbed dinner. I dropped them off, and then I actually met up with some other officials even later that had done other NorCal games, and we hung out a little bit. So all in all, from a conclusion perspective, I had a good time doing the NorCal game. Yes, the game was a blowout, but I thought our officials did a good job. I thought we had good chemistry, and I thought, we did a solid job. Now, I'm sure people can look at things to improve on. I'm going to, again, talk about it next. But as an experience-wise, I thought it was a good experience. It's good to get one done and hope for more. And again, I'll talk about that here in a second. So, lessons learned. Any NorCal game, regardless if it's a first-round game, second, third, the NorCal final or the state final, it's a big deal. How did I realize that? Well, going on YouTube the last couple of days, because, potentially of the lockdown, I found out that, several people have recorded the game and had video of us. Like, one person had highlights, other person recorded the whole game. And also, I didn't realize that one of the local high school sports shows actually was there to report on the game. So again, you see my face on TV. So that was kind of interesting. Even though the game turned out to be a blowout, we were out there. So, honestly, you have to be at your best no matter what, but especially during a NorCal game. But the lesson learned also is any other game these days, people record a lot of stuff, and you're going to be under a lot of scrutiny, and actually, but it's actually a good thing. So even though everything was recorded, it's actually good because it felt like I normally, as an official, we're asked, a lot of the more veteran people or college people tell us, hey, go watch yourself on video. Ask the coaches to get tape and go watch yourself and see what you think. Some of it's about call selection. Some of it's about how you look and how you present yourself, all of those type of things. I'll be honest, this season, it's been so busy. I was reffing so much. It was difficult to watch myself on tape. I didn't get any tape at all. So really, this season was the first time I actually, watching a NorCal game was the first time I watched myself on tape. And wow, I'm like, yeah, some things look good. And then there were other things I'm like, oh boy, I need to get better at. And I even told my partners that. A couple of things I noticed was I don't really, I got to figure it out. My foul mechanics with my arms, for some reason, my right shoulder is better than my left. I don't know if I hurt my shoulders before. Can't quite get my arms straight up on one of the shoulders. And it's a little bit weird looking. I don't really understand why. I thought I worked on it, but something to work on for the upcoming season. A couple other things is I've got a few habitual things like pulling on my pants. One call, well, the pulling on the pants thing, it makes you look like it makes it look like you're uncomfortable, maybe not confident. So I got to get rid of that little habit there. Another thing I noticed was I I called a foul, and instead of just keeping my head up, walking straight to the table, I for some reason look down. Don't really understand why. Just looked like I was like not happy with it or something. I don't really know why I did that. Why I just like, damn, that looked kind of bad. So a couple of little things like that I noticed. And a couple other one other thing I noticed was even during the action when I wasn't making foul calls, my hands, I had a habit of like they were in like it's kind of hard to say, like looked awkward. I probably should keep my arms straight down, blah blah blah. My arms are kind of going up a little bit. They were kind of hanging there, so it was kind of interesting looking at myself and saying, "Hey, you know what? You did I thought I did a decent job officiating a game." But looking at myself, I was like, damn, I could definitely look the part a lot better. And maybe I'm being hard on myself, but hey, whatever. That's what I noticed. So, again, even though I'm happy from a perspective of getting a chance to work on a game, it's not over. This is not an end goal. Even if I never do a NorCal game again, which I hope that's not the case, there's things I can work on. And, right now, with all the virus stuff, obviously not focused on that in terms of the actual physical mechanics. But actually, just to tie into what I was doing today, my normal job is a sales engineer. So I do a lot of talking. And by listening to my podcast, you guys probably know I do a lot I like to talk a lot. But part of the sales thing when you do is presenting yourself, in a confident manner. And I feel like in my sales, I generally do pretty well. But there's always things I can do better. And I was reading a book on charisma and how you could talk and present yourself and make yourself feel more comfortable, whether it's a mental thing or a physical thing, like how you dress. And I'm like, a lot of this applies to my job as a sales engineer, but also as an official. So I haven't finished the book yet. I'm about 3 chapters in. I think there's about 10. But I'm like, I'm going to take some of these things and try to apply to my officiating and be much more confident on how I feel physically, like how I dress. Don't do those little kind of awkward things like holding my arms in awkward positions or pulling my pants, and little things like that. So hopefully I'll get a chance to improve on that for next season. But besides the lesson learned, what's the future like? Man, there's a lot of question marks going on, guys. With the coronavirus going on, everything's canceled. Everything's on hold. Schools are on hold. All sports are on hold. Yes, the basketball season's over from a high school perspective, but I would be working adult leagues and kids leagues and other stuff where I can go work on things. Well, can't do much of that right now in terms of actual games. So obviously I'm working on, little things like my speech presentation, finding some confidence internally and presentation. I can work on little things like that. But, so that's a little unclear what's going to happen, how any of this coronavirus will impact the next high school season. We don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully schools will be back. Hopefully we'll play. But, that's a few months down the line. Don't know if camps are going to be canceled. We have a camp in June that I was going to go to. We'll see what happens with that. We'll see what happens with the adult leagues that I usually work during the summer to work on improving. All of that. But really, besides all of that, the key thing that could impact my officiating moving forward, and that's why I was kind of happy I got my NorCal game, is my job. I don't have one. I got laid off back in officially February. I was told in mid-January. I was hoping to get a job sooner than later, but with all this virus stuff, everything's on hold. Don't know what's going to happen. Who knows if I will get a job when the next high school season hopefully rolls around in October, November timeframe. But if I do get a job, it could be back to where like I was before, where, my officiating gets a little bit more limited. If I have to work a more regular time schedule, like an 8 to 5, whatever. Hopefully I don't, but we'll see what happens. So that's why, to be honest, I had already made it a goal at the end of last season, 2018-2019, that I wanted to do a NorCal game because I had a feeling that my job situation could change due to various factors, which I won't get into. So the fact that I lost my job, the timing was a surprise, but the fact that I lost it wasn't. So I did get my goal accomplished. Yes, 2020 right now with the coronavirus and my job loss does suck. No beating the bush. But I did accomplish a goal, and I'm happy about it. And could I have done better? Yes. Do I have things to work on? Yes. But at least I got it done. And if God willing, I will be able to do some more in the future and keep working to get better and see how far I can go. Anyways, I've gone on for quite a while. Hope you guys enjoy a little bit of my history, how I worked on my craft. To be honest, there's some really hardcore officials who really work on things to get better. There's the other half of the official. There's other officials who are very relaxed or just content to work games, get out, get some exercise, maybe make some money. And then there's kind of the middle tier officials where, you keep trying to get better. Maybe you're not as hardcore as some people. I think I'm in that kind of middle tier, to be honest. So overall, you know what? This was completely unexpected to get the NorCal this season, but I definitely enjoyed it, definitely appreciate it. I want to make sure I thank, like Mike Wong especially, Marcella, there's other folks I don't want to name everybody, and I can't name everybody, but anyone who I've had a chance to ask questions about, work with, I want to make sure to know, and whoever listens to this, I want to make sure to understand, I thank you. You know what? I might not have completely got it when I first talked to you, but I definitely understand things a lot better now than I did even when I almost decided to quit back in 2012-ish. So I've gotten a lot better. Hopefully I'll still keep getting better, even though, I'm a little older now. So my time as official, I should have a few more years. But, hey, you're getting older. It gets harder and harder to keep up with the kids. But hopefully I can still keep getting better and see how far I can go from my officiating standpoint. Any case, guys, thanks again for listening. Hope you have a great evening, rest of the evening, and a great week. I'll probably be back talking about other topics tomorrow. But enjoy the time at home with your family. Stay safe, and we'll catch up with you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye now.